In 1676, a description was given by an English surgeon named Glover of an animal of this kind. The author did not designate it by any name, but the incident has the honor of being recorded in the Philosophical Transactions. About 3 leagues from the mouth of the river Rappahannock in America, while alone in a vessel, he observed, at the distance of about half a stone's throw, he says, a most prodigious creature, much resembling a man, only somewhat larger, standing upright in the water, with his head, neck, shoulders, breast, and waist to the cubits of his arms, above water. His skin was tawny, much like that of an Indian. The figure of his head was pyramidal and sleek, without hair, his eyes large and black, and so were his eyebrows, his mouth very wide, with a broad black streak on the upper lip, which turned upwards at each end like mustachios. His countenance was grim and terrible. His neck, shoulders, arms, breast, and waist were like unto those of a man. His hands, if he had any, were under water. He seemed to stand with his eyes fixed on me for some time, and afterwards dived down. A little after, he rose at somewhat a greater distance, and turned his head towards me again, and then immediately fell a little under water, where I could discern him throw out his arms and gather them in as a man does when he swims. At last, he shot with his head downwards, by which means he cast his tail above the water, which exactly resembled the tail of a fish, with a broad fan at the end of it. Thormodus Torpheus maintains that mermaids are found on the south coast of Iceland, and, according to Olafsson, 2 have been taken in the surrounding seas, the first in the earlier part of the island's history, and the second in 1733. The latter was found in the stomach of a shark. Its lower parts were consumed, but the upper were intact. They were as large as those of a boy 8 or 9 years old. Both the cutting teeth and grinders were long and shaped like pins, and the fingers were connected by a large web. Olafsson was inclined to believe these were human remains, but the islanders all firmly maintained that they were part of a marmanel, by which name the mermaid is known among them. Of course, the worthy Bishop of Bergen, Pontoppidan, has something to tell us about mermaids in his part of the world. Amongst the sea monsters, he says, which are in the North Sea and are often seen, I shall give the first place to the Havmanden, or merman, whose mate is called Havfruen, or mermaid. The existence of this creature is questioned by many, nor is it at all to be wondered at, because most of the accounts we have had of it are mixed with mere fables and may be looked upon as idle tales. As such, he regards the story told by Jonas Ramus in his History of Norway, of a mermaid taken by fishermen at Hordland, near Bergen, who is said to have sung an unmusical song to King Kyrleif. In the same category, he places an account given by Basinius in his Life of Frederick II, 1577, of a mermaid that called herself Isprint and held several conversations with a peasant at Samso, in which she foretold the birth of King Christian IV, and made the peasant preach repentance to the courtiers, who were very much given to drunkenness. Equally idle with the above stories is, in his opinion, another tale, extracted from an old manuscript still to be seen in the University Library at Copenhagen and quoted by Andrew Bussius, 1619, of a merman caught by 2 senators, Ulf Rosenspear and Christian Halch, whilst on their voyage home to Denmark from Norway. This seaman frightened the 2 worshipful gentlemen so terribly that they were glad to let him go again, for as he lay upon the deck, he spoke Danish to them and threatened that if they did not give him his liberty, the ship should be cast away, and every soul of the crew should perish. When such fictions as these, says Pontoppidan, are mixed with the history of the merman, and when that creature is represented as a prophet and an orator, when they give the mermaid a melodious voice, and tell us that she is a fine singer, we need not wonder that so few people of sense will give credit to such absurdities, or that they even doubt the existence of such a creature. The good prelate, however, goes on to say that, whilst we have no ground to believe all these fables, yet, as to the existence of the creature, we may safely give our assent to it, and, if this be called in question, it must proceed entirely from the fabulous stories usually mixed with the truth. Like Valentine, he argues that as there are seahorses, sea cows, sea wolves, sea dogs, sea hogs, etc., it is probable, from analogy, that we should find in the ocean a fish or creature which resembles the human species more than any other. As for the objection, founded on self-love and respect to our own species, which is honored with the image of God, who made man Lord of all creatures, and that, consequently, we may suppose he is entitled to a noble and heavenly form which other creatures must not partake of. He thinks its force vanishes when we consider the form of apes, and especially of another African creature called Uyasmorov, described by Oder Dapper in his work on Africa, and which appears to have been a chimpanzee. Pontoppidan regarded it as the satyr of the ancients. He therefore claims that if we will not allow our Norwegian Hastrumber the honorable name of merman, we may very well call it the sea ape, or the sea Quasmorov, especially as the author already quoted says that in the Sea of Angola, mermaids are frequently caught which resemble the human species. They are taken in nets and killed by the Negroes and are heard to shriek and cry like women. The bishop adds that in the Diocese of Bergen, as well as in the manor of Nordland, there were hundreds of persons who affirmed with the strongest assurances that they had seen this kind of creature, sometimes at a distance, and at other times quite close to their boats, standing upright and formed like a human creature down to the middle. The rest they could not see. But of those who had seen them out of water and handled them, he had not been able to find more than one person of credit who could vouch it as truth. This informant, the Reverend Mr. Morton Angel, minister of Van Elven's Guild on Suderø, assured his bishop when he was on a visitation journey that in the year 1719, he, being then about 20 years old, saw what is called a merman lying dead on a point of land near the sea, which had been cast ashore by the waves along with several sea calves, seals, and other dead fish. The length of this creature was much greater than what has been mentioned of any before, namely, above 3 fathoms. It was of a dark gray color all over. In the lower part, it was like a fish and had a tail like that of a porpoise. The face resembled that of a man, with a mouth, forehead, eyes, etc. The nose was flat and, as it were, pressed down to the face, in which the nostrils were very visible. The breast was not far from the head. The arms seemed to hang to the side, to which they were joined by a thin skin or membrane. The hands were, to all appearance, like the paws of a sea calf. The back of this creature was very fat, and a great part of it was cut off, which, with the liver, yielded a large quantity of train oil. The author then quotes a description by Luke Deebs of a mermaid seen in 1670 at Faroe, westward of Qualbo-Ide, by many of the inhabitants, as also by others from different parts of Suderø. She was close to the shore and stood there for 2.5 hours, up to her waist in water. She had long hair on her head, which hung down to the surface of the water all around her, and she held a fish in her right hand. Pontoppidan mentions other instances of similar appearances and says that the latest he had heard of was of a merman seen in Denmark on the 20th of September, 1723, by 3 ferrymen who, at some distance from land, were towing a ship just arrived from the Baltic. Having caught sight of something that looked like a dead body floating on the water, they rowed towards it. Resting on their oars, they allowed it to drift close to them. It sank but immediately came to the surface again, and they then saw that it had the appearance of an old man, strong-limbed and with broad shoulders, but his arms they could not see. His head was small in proportion to his body, with short, curled black hair that did not reach below his ears. His eyes lay deep in his head, and he had a meager and pinched face, with a black, coarse beard that looked as if it had been trimmed. His skin was coarse and very full of hair. He stood in the same place for half a quarter of an hour and was seen above the water down to his breast. At last, the men grew apprehensive of some danger and began to retreat, upon which the monster blew up his cheeks, made a kind of roaring noise, and then dived under water so that they did not see him again. One of them, Peter Gunnarsson, related, what the others did not observe, that this merman was, about the body and downwards, quite pointed, like a fish. This same Peter Gunnarsson likewise deposed that, about 20 years before, as he was in a boat near Culler, the place where he was born, he saw a mermaid with long hair and large breasts. He and his 2 companions were, by command of the king, examined by the burgomaster of Elsineur, Andrew Bussius, before the privy councillor Frederick von Graham, and their testimony to the above effect was given on their respective oaths. Brave old Henry Hudson, the sturdy and renowned navigator, who thrice in 3 successive years gave battle to the northern ice, and was each time defeated in his endeavor to discover a north. He stood in the same place for half a quarter of an hour and was seen above the water down to his breast. He turned his face and looked earnestly at them several times. At last, he slowly sank backwards and then lifted his whole body above the water, as if with the intention of diving forwards, and so disappeared. Pontoppidan concludes his account by stating that the story was confirmed by all three ferrymen individually, who were questioned separately, and they all agreed in their description. He remarks that although such accounts may be mixed with fable, there is no reason to doubt the sincerity of many witnesses who claim to have seen such creatures. In summary, while skepticism is natural in regard to mermaids and mermen, accounts from seemingly credible observers throughout history, including clergymen, surgeons, and sailors, persist. They suggest that some creature, human-like in form and aquatic in nature, may indeed inhabit the seas, giving rise to the legends and sightings that continue to intrigue us to this day.